Time for the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they come in. We begin with our sister publication, as usual, This morning, its leading story, economic reforms. President Tinubu begins broad consultations. That's the big story. Sets up tripartite advisory committee and meets private sector leaders and governors. That story is on page 5. There's also information coming from the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation. Nigeria reaping the benefits of reform. You can see the infographics there. Let's just take some of that. Petrol importation is now down 50% since petrol subsidy removal. That's according to the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation. If you want to get more information on that, get a copy of This Day. Nationwide protests. Falana writes federal government says the Nigeria Labour Congress NLC not in contempt of court, insists Nigerians do not require permits to demonstrate in public interest matters. Meanwhile, NLC is accusing the government of planning mayhem against workers. Above the nameplate of This Day this morning, in the black strip, Qatar rescinds decision disputed business forum to now hold during President Tinubu's visit. Uzoka Anyete, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. Nigeria to influence policy outcomes as the World Trade Organization 13th Ministerial Conference begins today in the UAE as it seeks equitable rules to enhance food security and others.
The paid information by the Ministry of Information and National Orientation makes it to the bottom fold of the Vanguard this morning. You find it in a couple of national dailies this morning as well. But the big story on the front page there, job losses, factory closures loom as unsold goods pile up. And that's according to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Naira plunges 254% in 8 months. Existence of MSMEs further threatened, says another association. A CBN should adopt managed flotation of Naira. That's coming from the CPPE. Above the masthead, we do have a story on the upcoming Edo governorship race. We have 15 men and 1 woman standing. They are angling to succeed Governor Godwin Obaseki. Forex crisis, clamp down on businesses. It will worsen situation. That's according to Peter Obi, former governor of Anambra State and former presidential candidate of the Labour Party. Anti-hardship rally. Falana writes AGF seeks protection for NLC protesters. This and many more in the Vanguard.
Right, let's look at Punch. Punch also has that story of diagrams of reaping the benefits of reforms. But its big stories on NLC protest presidency. Police issue fresh warnings. 65 groups pull out. Don't disrupt commercial activities, vehicular movements. Lagos CP tells protesters protest illegal, says presidency. CSO's NLC alleges government's plot to disrupt the demonstration. Let's look at the top mast. Forex crisis threatens modern refineries. 25 billion naira daily crude impute. Governors Elumelu Dangote make Tinubu economic advisory panel. That's on the Punch.
The New Telegraph this morning, leading with that story, Tinubu to tripartite panel. We may not have answers now, but we are trying, as he sets up that Presidential Economic Advisory Committee. Dangote says we have what it takes to turn around the economy. At the bottom there, you have another story from the NLC. They say they will initiate immediate strike action if attacked during protests scheduled for tomorrow, February 27 and February 28. Customs await federal government directive on Niger Republic border reopening. Meanwhile, Edo 2024, there's confusion as 3 Guba candidates emerge in Labour Party parallel primaries. That's the New Telegraph.
Well, The Guardian has a couple of stories on its front page, but it leads with the FX crisis. Nigeria falling out of top 4 African economies on weak currency. It does break it down for you, the nominal GDP in dollars there. ASU warns of imminent strike over alleged insensitivity by the federal government. This is coming barely 2 weeks after the Chief of Staff to the President met with the Association of Nigerian Students and promising them that the government is actively working to ensure that this does not see the light of day. He says the days of strike are long over, and the government will continue to intervene. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But here we are, ASU is warning of this imminent strike, according to The Guardian. Another story that makes it to the front of The Guardian: 65 civil society organizations withdraw as NLC dares federal government, mobilizes for nationwide protests. Conditional cash transfer to resume amid probe is another story. And Nigeria hopeful of positive outcomes at WTO, says Minister. The Guardian.
All right, let's look at the Punch Sports Extra. It says 2 in 2. Napoli forward Osimhen strikes again in second game after AFCON. Jorginho reveals Ghana's secret. City plays £100 million on De Bruyne. Fierce rivals continue battle for Olympic ticket. Falcons, Nigeria face Falcons. And the Sarabia strike compounds Blades' woes. That is, Wolves beat Sheffield United 1-0. And Late Van Dijk header seals Reds Carabao Cup win that beat Chelsea yesterday 1-0. That's it for the Sports Extra.
Some business on the front page of BusinessDay this morning. Its leading story on what the CBN is doing. It says CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, mops up 1.51 trillion naira in 4 months to stabilize the economy. That's the BusinessDay.
The leadership. We have a leadership this morning. Great. 5.108 trillion naira in 8 months. And I guess that's the total of what has been shared by the different tiers of government. But the paper says, despite this, hardship remains unabated in states, despite these huge allocations. Labour warns federal government against attack on protesters. The leading photograph is that from the presidential villa as President Bola Tinubu meets with private sector representatives yesterday, where he formed a tripartite economic advisory committee. The leadership.
All right, let's look at what some of the foreign papers are saying. We'll start with the I on its front page. Tory party in the Gaza over racism wants Wasi. What's this about, really? It says Rishi Sunak under pressure to act against allegations of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party as row deepens.
The Guardian UK this morning. Sunak urged to speak out as Islamophobia row deepens. Tory pair calls on PM to denounce Anderson's remarks on the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. The leading photo for The Guardian UK this morning is that of some mourners at Abu Yusuf al-Najjar Hospital in Rafah, with bodies of those killed in Israeli strikes. Now, Gaza deaths set to pass 30,000 as Israel prepares Rafah assault.
And let's bring in our senior correspondent, Benga Ashiru, for analysis of some of those big stories on the front pages this Monday morning. Benga, great to see you again on Daybreak. Thanks for being here.
Always a delight to be with you.
Great, great. Now, if you look at a couple of the papers, for instance, our sister publication, if you pull that up, economic reforms, President Tinubu begins wide consultations, sets up tripartite advisory committee, meets private sector leaders as well as governors. In the yellow box window, nationwide protest, Falana writes, federal government says NLC not in contempt of court. What's your pick this morning, Benga?
Okay, let's start from the first. Tinubu initiating a grand and what I would call an ambitious plan, coming up with a tripartite economic advisory committee. I doubt if the federal government is not going clueless right now. And if you ask me, he had invited the chairman of BUA Group, he had invited the president of Dangote Group, and I wonder, except for the likes of Charles Soludo, who is obviously occupied with the task of governing Anambra State, you know that Anambra State is in the thick of what we call the separatist movement now. But I wonder if the president is not steering a league of capitalists that is calling an economic committee, an economic advisory committee. So what we need now is an interventionist body, interventionist team that has that economic ability, that economic survey that can turn things around, because we are in a dire state. And I wonder if the country is not sloping into what we will call a pariah state. It's a very desperate situation that needs the economic intelligence team to steer us out of these woods. It's a quagmire that we are now. Inflation rising 284% in 8 months, plunging that deep. It calls for a serious concern. The likes of Dangote have their business interests. He has chains of business. So I wonder how much interventionist plan that the likes of Dangote, the chairman of BUA Group, and the likes will be coming up with, and with the person, the only one who has really proven himself in terms of economic competence, Professor Charles Soludo, who is occupied in governing, with the task of governing Anambra State. So I think what we need now is an economic intelligence team that could steer the nation out of the woods, and not that of a tripartite, because I think he's getting obsessed with the word tripartite, and it seems that that is the cutting edge word to use to make it look as if, anyway, he betrayed himself by saying that he may not have the solutions right, but he's trying. The nation is too big, it's too sensitive, it's too delicate to place on a trial and error version. That aside, now let's go to the issue of the labor crisis and the government labor standoff on this matter. It's gradually, while there's a mixed reaction on this, it's gradually turning into illegal fireworks. And this thing started in 2003 when the federal government came up with this suggestion that it was willing to listen to labor and it was willing to settle out of court. Remember that they had already gone to court, restraining the labor from going on this protesting against fuel subsidy, not on the worsening economic situation. So there are two different things. So after a while, the federal government met with labor, they piled up, and they decided to withdraw the case. And afterward, they brought back the case after some ex parte injunction that was withdrawn. And when you look at the case, there's a difference between restraining the labor from going on fuel subsidy protest and restraining the labor from going to protest peacefully on the worsening economic situation. And you also remember that the issue of jurisdiction was also raised in this matter, when Falana also argued that the National Industrial Court, headed by Kenya, does not have that competence and jurisdiction to entertain that matter. So along the line, the federal government and labor came up, they piled up, and they came up with a 16-point memorandum of understanding in which the labor has accused that the federal government has not implemented anything in this one. And don't also forget that this planned labor strike is coming up after a 14-day ultimatum. I think that if federal government is committed in addressing this situation, they should have had meetings with labor. We have a minister of states, Inkiru Onyejicha, in charge of labor right now, that could have steered this initiative and given them that confidence to know that, okay, this is our plan, okay, let us see how we can meet halfway. It's about give and take. But right now, we have seen 65 CSOs pulling out of this planned protest. It's not because they are endorsing the federal government, it's because they are threatened. They just cannot predict what the federal government could do. And this is setting a very dangerous precedent, and also the kind of perception that this is going to meet in the international community is very, very worrisome. So I think that the federal government, rather than using the bullying tactics, should sit and dialogue with labor. The labor unions are always willing to dialogue and see how we can come up with a solution. Even the labor unions, when you meet with them, they have brilliant ideas. They have accused the federal government of towing the part of the IMF and the World Bank. That, for instance, the subsidy withdrawal and many of these policies are being driven by the IMF initiatives, which are not in Nigeria's interest. So when you look at the whole scenario, it calls for a quick intervention, an extensive consultation that would be solution-driven, not this trial and error that we found ourselves in. For 8 months, 284%.
Let's look at Vanguard. Vanguard has a story on Qatar making a U-turn to host investment forum during Tinubu's visit there. Would you say that his visits are yielding, or efforts to bring in FDIs are yielding fruits? With all the story about Qatar before now?
Okay, when you look at the Qatar issue, this controversy started with a note verbal that was leaked. A note verbal in the international relations, in the international community, is a very serious attestation document. I used to know from the little I did in international relations and strategic studies that foreign policy instruments are shrouded with complete confidentiality and secrecy. So when you look at the way, it first of all puts a question tag on the handlers and gatekeepers. In this kind of situation, heads would have rolled in some other planes. So, but let's come back to the issue. The federal government was able to wriggle itself out of that scandal, diplomatic scandal, if I will call it, by saying that the president's visit is still intact. It's the one organized by Nasima and the Ministry of Trade that the country that Qatar pulled out of because of insufficient protocol. And this is where shuttle diplomacy comes in. When you are having such a grand event, there is a need for preparation. There's a need for pre-shuttle diplomacy. There's a need for an advanced party that would have tightened all the news before getting to that note verbal stage in which Qatar, because it's a diplomatic embarrassment to the country, no matter how you look at it, and we cannot shy away from it. So those in the thick of this ought to answer some questions to save Nigeria, because we cannot afford to add this embarrassment to what Nigerians are facing right now. It's indeed a low watermark, and it's most uncharitable and most unacceptable. Nigeria has gone beyond such embarrassment that such leakage will be causing such an uproar and a scandal to the nation's image internationally. So I think that those within that strategic formation needs to know how to tighten up the arrangements clearly. If you look at the initiative, it's a laudable arrangement. They are trying. It's a bilateral trade arrangement which Nigeria needs right now to get out of this quagmire that we are in. But the need to go about it most professionally is most demanding at this point in time.
All right, Benga, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much.